Hi everyone, myself Jharna Fukan, lecturer in psychology of Solbrook Academy. This is completely an introductory video. In this video, I will give you a brief idea about the subject psychology, the chapters it covers in class 11, and the contents that are included in these chapters. In class 11 textbook, there are 9 chapters covering different basic topics that will help you to get a brief knowledge of psychology. There is only one 100 marks theory paper in class 11, but in class 12 you will have two papers, one 70 marks theory paper and another one 30 marks practical paper. We expect you to be very sincere and serious in attending our classes. Okay, let's begin now. Chapter 1, this is what is psychology, and this chapter will help you to understand the nature and role of psychology in understanding mind and behavior. You would be able to state the growth of the discipline, know the different fields of psychology, its relationship with other disciplines and professions, and you'd be able to appreciate the value of psychology in daily life to help you understand yourself and others better. So this chapter actually covers the important topics that is mainly related to the subject psychology, and the contents that covers um, is the what is psychology, psychology as a discipline. Psychology as a discipline actually has two parallel streams. One is a natural science and other one is social science, and psychologists, they are very much eager to study these two streams in a very detailed manner. The next important topic is understanding mind and behavior. Modern psychologists, physicists, they are very much eager to study the mind because for them, mind also influences our behavior. For many decades, psychologists did not use the word mind because modern psychologists accept psychology as a scientific study in mental processes, experiences, and behaviors. But modern physicists, they accept mind and they state that mind influences our behavior in many ways. The next important topic is popular notions about the discipline of psychology. So this topic states that there are some common sense views about psychology, but these common sense views are different from the psychologist, because psychologist always uses some systematic procedures to develop the concepts and theories of psychology. Then evolution of psychology is another important topic. It basically states that there are some schools of psychology like structuralism school, functionalism school, behaviorism school, Gestalt school, psychoanalytic school, then humanistic school, cognitive school, and all these schools actually they have developed their own concepts in studying the mental processes, experiences, and behaviors of people. The next important topic is development of psychology in India. This topic states that there are some psychological developments in India also. First time actually in India, the first psychology laboratory was established at Calcutta University. The Department of Psychology also first was established in Calcutta University, and so on. So all these are also studied in this topic. Then branches of psychology is another important topic that states that there are several branches of psychology like cognitive psychology, biological psychology, developmental psychology, physiological psychology, social psychology. Then there are some applied branches of psychology like clinical psychology, industrial psychology, educational psychology, and so on. So all these are some branches of psychology, and all these branches actually they try to develop their own theories and own concepts. The next important topic is themes of research and application. This topic states that psychologists are actually engaged in two different fields. One is the research work and other one is the application side. So one group of psychologists are always engaged themselves in research work. They formulate different theories and principles of psychology, and there are other groups of psychologists also, and they apply the principles formulated by the researcher group. They are the applied psychologists. So this topic states that there are two themes of actually themes of research and applications, and in this book 5 themes of research and applications are discussed. And next topic is psychology and other disciplines. Psychology is related to many other disciplines. It is related to philosophy, it is related to economics, political science, sociology, it is related to medicine, it is related to music, it is related to engineering and architecture, it is related to computer science, and so on. So psychologists study all these disciplines, also how they are related to the subject psychology. The next important topic is psychologists at work. So psychologists nowadays are engaged in different fields. Some are known as clinical psychologists, who are engaged in hospital settings, who basically deal with the mental health problems of the people, and they are basically severe mental health problems. Then some psychologists are known as counseling psychologists. They deal with the mild mental health problems. And there are some psychologists, they basically deal with the problems of the students, and they are known as the school psychologists as well as educational psychologists. Some psychologists also like to solve the problems of the workers who are engaged in a workplace setting. They are known as the organizational psychologists, and so on. So all these groups of psychologists are engaged in different fields. The next important topic is psychology in everyday life. This topic states that psychology nowadays is used in solving different problems that we face in our day-to-day life. So this topic states that in our day-to-day life we always use psychology. Actually, in at our home also we use psychology, at our school we use psychology, in dealing with the peer groups also we use psychology. So in different aspects of life we always use psychology. So this chapter in that sense is a very important chapter, and it will provide you several important informations related to the subject psychology. Then the chapter 2, this is known as the methods of inquiry in psychology. So this is another important chapter, an interesting chapter. And this chapter actually will help you to explain the goals and nature of psychological inquiry, and understand different types of data used by psychologists, and you'd be able to describe some important methods of psychological inquiry, then understand the methods of analyzing data, and learn about the limitations of psychological inquiry and ethical considerations. So these are important actually topics that are available in this chapter, and the contents that are available in chapter 2 are the goals of psychological inquiry. There are 5 goals actually. They are known as the description, prediction, explanation, control, and application. So psychologists actually study all these goals, and they are basically used in scientific research, and psychological inquiry has these goals. And there are some steps in conducting scientific research, and all these steps are also studied in this topic. Then nature of psychological data is another important topic, because there's several kinds of data, like physical data, physiological data, demographic data, then psychological data. So all these informations or data are studied in this topic, that is known as the psychological data. Then there are some important methods in psychology. Now, in studying mental processes, experiences, and behavior, psychologists actually use several methods. Some psychologists use observational methods, some use experimental methods, some use correlational methods, some use survey research, and some use psychological testing, some use case study. Thus, several methods are used in studying all these experiences, behaviors, and mental processes of individuals. Then analysis of data is another important topic. There are 2 different methods actually. Some psychologists use quantitative method, some psychologists use qualitative method. By using all these methods, psychologists try to analyze data or information. Then limitations of psychological inquiry is also another important topic. There are some limitations actually, and these limitations are lack of true zero point, then relative nature of psychological tools, then subjective interpretation of qualitative data. So all these are studied in this chapter. And next important topic is the ethical issues. That is the last topic of this chapter, and there are some ethical considerations actually. And these are voluntary participation, informed consent, then debriefing, then sharing the results of the study, then confidentiality of the data source. So these ethical principles actually should be followed by the psychologist in studying psychological research. Then third chapter, that is known as the basis of human behavior. So this is another important chapter, and after reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the evolutionary nature of human behavior and relate the functions of nervous system and endocrine system to behavior, and you would be able to explain the role of genetic factors in determining behavior. You would be able to understand the role of culture in shaping human behavior, then describe the processes of enculturation, socialization, acculturation, and relate biological and socio-cultural factors in understanding human behavior. So the contents that are available in chapter 3 are the evolutionary perspective, then biological and cultural roots. Actually, biological and cultural roots these are the two determinants of our behavior. There are some biological roots as well as the cultural roots. Now, biological basis of behavior basically includes neurons, then nervous system that includes brain, spinal cord, then autonomic nervous system, and then so on. Then endocrine system also is another important biological basis, because they also influence our behavior in many ways. And heredity, genes and behavior, that also is another important part related to the biological basis of behavior. Psychologists study all these processes because they influence our behavior in many ways. As the subject psychology always study the behavior of human beings, and these processes, this structure also influence our behavior in many ways, and hence psychologists are very much eager to study all these processes in a detailed manner. Then another topic that is known as cultural basis. Now, cultural basis or the socio-cultural shaping of behavior, that is another important topic. Like the biological basis, cultural basis also equally plays important role in our behavior, because our culture always shape our behavior, and modern psychologists, they accept that our culture influence our thought process, our emotions, our behaviors, and so on, and hence they are very much eager to study all the cultural basis. And enculturation, socialization, acculturation, all these are some processes actually related to our culture, and they influence our behavior. So psychologists study all these processes in a very detailed manner, and all these are available in chapter 3. Then chapter 4, this is known as the human development. Actually, development is a continuous process, it is a lifelong process, and this chapter includes all the stages of lifespan development. It is a very important chapter, and after reading this chapter, you would be able to describe the meaning and processes of development, explain the influence of heredity, environment, and context of human development, and you would be able to identify the stages of development and describe the major characteristics of infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old stage. And also you'd be able to reflect on your own course of development and related experiences. So the contents that are included in this chapter 4 are the meaning of development. Okay, what is development? What are the characteristics related to our development? What factors influence our development? What is the context of development? Actually, there's some context, and ecological conditions as well as some other external conditions also influence our life in our development, and psychologists, they study all these factors and how they influence our life. They study in a very detailed manner. There are different psychologists, theorists, and they develop their own theory in related to the development. And there's some The next topic is the overview of developmental stages. Actually, all the stages are studied in a very detailed manner in this chapter, from the prenatal stage to the old stage. So first stage of the human life is known as the prenatal stage. This is the first stage, and it is actually before birth stage, and it lasts for 9 months 10 days when people are in the mother's womb. Okay, so it lasts about 40 weeks in that sense. So this stage also plays important role in human's life, and hence psychologists study this stage. And the second stage is known as the infancy stage, and all the developmental tasks like motor development, sensory then developments, then cognitive development, socio emotional developments of infancy stage are studied in a very detailed manner in this chapter. Then next stage is known as the childhood stage. all the developmental tasks like physical development, motor development, cognitive development, and all kinds of socio-emotional development. So all kinds of developmental tasks of childhood stage also are studied in a detailed manner in this chapter. The next developmental stage is known as the adolescent stage. Now adolescent stage also is another important stage. Physical development of the adolescent people, then cognitive developmental changes, then forming an identity, then some major concerns. So all these are some important topics then related to this stage. Now delinquency, substance abuse, eating disorder, these are some major challenges actually faced by adolescents. So these topics are studied in a very detailed manner in this portion. Then adulthood stage also is another important stage, and all the major concerns of the adolescent stage like career and work, marriage, parenthood and family. So these are also studied in a detailed manner. Then last stage is known as the old stage of development. The modern psychologists, they are very much eager to study old stage of development also, because that stage is the last stage, and there are some problems faced by people at this stage like loneliness, then depression. So all these are some then economic problems, separation. So all these are some problems faced by old people at that stage. Psychologists also study that stage because that stage also influence an individual's life and behavior in many ways, and hence all these stages from prenatal to the old stage are analyzed and studied by the developmental psychologist in a very detailed manner. So all these topics are available in chapter 4. Then chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the sensory, attentional and perceptual processes. In the previous chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, you have got the idea that how we respond to various stimuli present in the external and internal environment with the help of our receptors. While some of these receptors are clearly observable, and for example eyes or ears, but others lie inside our body and are not observable without the help of electrical or mechanical devices. So this chapter will introduce you to various receptors that collect a variety of information from the external and internal worlds. Okay, so the focus will be on the eye and ear, structure and function of the eye and ear in this chapter. So after reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the nature of sensory processes, explain the processes and types of attention, analyze the problems of form and space perception, examine the role of socio-cultural factors in perception, and reflect on sensory, attentional and perceptual processes in everyday life. So the contents that are available in chapter 5 are the knowing the world. Okay, then in knowing this world, actually we use 3 processes of us, and these are the sensation, attention and perception, and these processes are highly interrelated process, and they are often considered as different elements of the same process that is known as cognition. Okay, then the nature and varieties of stimulus, sense modalities like visual sensation and other human senses are also studied in this chapter, and auditory sensation also is studied in a detailed manner. Then next is the attentional process. So attentional process includes the nature of attention, the types of attention like selective attention, sustained attention, and span of attention, what is meant by divided attention, what is meant by ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. All these are related to the attentional process, and psychologists study all these processes in a very detailed manner. And the next one is known as the perceptual process. So perception is another important process, and the meaning of perception, the processing approaches in perception, the perceived perceiver, what factors influence a perceiver, what are the principles of perceptual organization. So all these are related to perceptual process. And there are some other topics also like perception of space, depth and distance, monocular cues, binocular cues, and so on. Then perceptual constancies also is another important topic. There are some constancies like shape constancy, brightness constancy, size constancy. So all these are related to perceptual process. Then there is another important topic that is known as illusion. Okay, so illusion actually is known as the false perception. So it is a kind of perception, but that is known as false perception. Okay, so psychologists They also eager to study different types of illusions. Okay, some types of illusions are geometrical in nature, some are universal, some are personal. So all kinds of illusions are also available in us, and we experience all these illusions in our life, and psychologists study all these types of illusions. And the last topic of this chapter, that is known as socio-cultural influences on perception. Psychologists also state that our culture influences our perception. Perception is highly influenced by one's own culture, and how culture influences our perception, that is another important topic available in this chapter 5. The next chapter is known as the learning. Actually, learning is one important topic, and it is a permanent change in behavior or behavior potential that is produced by experience. So psychologists, they are very much eager to study different concepts related to learning, different methods of learning, and so on. So after reading this chapter, you would be able to describe the nature of learning, then explain different forms or types of learning and the procedures used in such types of learning. And also you would be able to understand various psychological processes that occur during learning and influence its course. You would be able to explain the determinants of learning and familiarize yourself with some applications of learning principles. And the contents of this chapter are the nature of learning. First of all, the first topic is known as the nature of learning. It states that there are some common characteristics of learning, whether it is permanent or not, then what type of behavioral changes generally people face in their lives. So all these are actually the part of learning. Now there are some methods of learning. Okay, so psychologists actually they develop different concepts, and on the basis of their own theories they develop all these concepts. And there are some popular theories like classical conditioning theory forwarded by Ivan P. Pavlov, then operant conditioning theory by developed by Skinner, B.F. Skinner. Then another one is observational learning, then verbal learning, concept learning, skill learning. So these are different methods of learning. Then another important topic is transfer of learning. Okay, there's some positive transfer, negative transfer, and so on. And psychologists study all these transfer concepts of learning, transfer of learning. Then factors facilitating learning is another important topic. Different factors actually facilitate us in our learning process. The next topic is known as the learner. Now there is a learning style. Actually there are different learning styles, and all these styles are also studied. You will be able to study all these learning styles in this chapter. Then learning disabilities. Okay, learning disabilities also is another important topic. Like dyslexia is one kind of learning disability. It is a very common term actually, and you will know what is the meaning of dyslexia, what are the characteristics related to it, and so on. The last topic is known as applications of learning principles. Okay, so there are some applications that we use in our learning process. So psychologists, they also are eager to study all these learning principles and how they influence our life. And the chapter 7, next chapter is chapter 7, that is human memory. So memory also is another important process, that is a cognitive process. And memory actually is known as the encoding, storing, and retrieval of information that one is required to perform. And it is another important chapter. And after reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the nature of memory, then distinguish between different types of memory, explain how the contents of long-term memory are represented and organized, then appreciate the constructive and reconstructive processes in memory, understand the nature and causes of forgetting, and learn the strategies for improving memory. And the contents that are available in chapter 7 are the nature of memory. There are several processing approaches. So one is known as information processing approach, that is the first stage model of memory. And the next topic is memory systems. Okay, there are different systems of memory. You can say it as the types of memory. There's sensory memory, the short-term memory, long-term memory, what is meant by working memory. So all these are available in this part. Then levels of processing is another important topic. And also there are some types of long-term memory like declarative memory, procedural memory, episodic memory, semantic memory. So all these are available in it. And knowledge representation and organization in memory also is another important part. Then next important topic is memory as a constructive process. The next important topic is known as nature and causes of forgetting. Actually, memory and forgetting both are very important in our life. Like memory, forgetting also plays important role in our life, because it is not possible for us to store so many informations in the memory system or in our brain, and hence we need to forget the unnecessary informations. In that sense, forgetting plays important role in our life. And the different theories of forgetting, and there are also causes of forgetting, and psychologists study all these causes of forgetting in a very detailed manner. And the last important topic is known as enhancing memory. Psychologists, they state that we can enhance our memory also. There are some techniques and that are basically used to enhance our memory, like mnemonics, using images and organization, and there are some other techniques also. And psychologists, they study all these topics in a very detailed manner, and if we use or apply all these techniques in our life to some extent, we can improve our memory, but we need time. Then chapter 8. Chapter 8 is that is thinking. So this is another important process. Actually, thinking is one important cognitive process of us, and after reading this chapter you would be able to describe the nature of thinking and reasoning. You would be able to demonstrate an understanding of some cognitive processes involved in problem solving and decision making, understand the nature and process of creative thinking, and learn ways of enhancing it. Then you would be able to understand the relationship between language and thought, and also you'd be able to describe the processes of language development and its use. And the contents are the nature of thinking, that states that there's some building blocks of thought and concept, mental image, all these are important blocks of thought. Then culture influence our thinking or not, that is another important topic. And what are the processes of thinking? Problem solving, reasoning, decision making. So all these are some processes that influence our thought. Psychologists study all these processes in a very detailed manner, and you will study all these processes in this chapter. Then nature and processes of creative thinking. What is meant by creative thinking, what is lateral thinking, then what is meant by convergent thinking, what is divergent thinking, then what are the processes of creative thinking, and how we can develop our creative thinking, what are the barriers to creative thinking, and what are the strategies that are basically used to develop our creative thinking. These are some important topics. And another important topic is known as thought and language. Now, thought and language, whether are related or not, that is also one important topic. Then development of language and language use, that is also one important topic available in chapter 8. Then chapter 9, that is the last chapter, it is known as motivation and emotion. Actually, motivation and emotion, these two processes are highly interrelated. Why of behavior, how of behavior, they actually tells us our motivation and emotion. So after reading this chapter, you would be able to understand the nature of human motivation, then describe the nature of some important motives, describe the nature of emotional expression, understand the relationship between culture and emotion, and know how to manage your own emotions. And the contents are the nature of emotion or motivation, types of motives, then biological motives, psychosocial motives. So how they influence us in our life, they're studied in this in a very detailed manner. And then Maslow's need hierarchy theory, one important theory forwarded by humanistic psychologist Abraham Maslow. Actually, this is also known as a self-actualization theory. This theory also is available in the chapter. And nature of emotion, that includes the physiological basis of emotion, cognitive basis of emotion, cultural basis of emotion, and so on. And expressing emotion is another important topic, whether culture influence our emotional expression or not. Culture and emotional leveling also is another important topic. Then managing negative emotion, that is one important topic. Actually, how we can manage our negative emotions, okay, anger, sorrow. So these are some kinds of negative emotion, and how we can control all these negative emotions that are actually studied by psychologists, and the techniques are also discussed in this portion. Then post traumatic stress disorder, then management of examination anxiety, And last topic, that is known as enhancing positive emotions. How we can enhance our positive emotion, what is meant by emotional intelligence, and so on. So all these are some important topics that are in the chapter 9. Thank you.